Hello, this is Steve Semler with the Circuit Breakers podcast from LearningSim FocalPoint. And here today with me is Travis Johansen, who's the director of photography and executive producer for Provid, an innovative video company here in Minnesota. And looking forward to finding out some more about some of the tips and things that Travis has learned along the way in his career journey. So circuit breakers is the opportunity for folks to share with us, how do we break out of the circuit of the routine and stay innovative and do things that are different and keeping up and in touch with where business is moving. So Travis, thanks. Would you mind kind of starting off with some, just kind of a brief background on who you are and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, for sure. My name is Travis Johansen. I grew up, we're both in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis area. I grew up on the west side, kind of Lake Minnetonka area. So if you know that area, that's, you know, crazy, really successful people that live on that lake, right? It's not the cheapest place to live. So you grew up around that wealth, even if I didn't have any of that wealth, right? So the cool thing is that when you're surrounded by that, you see people who have stuff, and you always wonder, like, how do they get that house, right? Or how did they get that boat or that yacht? And you realize, like, the way that they got that is through solving problems and helping people. Like, nobody went and clocked in and like bought that $12 million house on Lake Minnetonka, right? Like, they're not clocking in and clocking out. They're creating a business, and that business has to serve enough people and solve enough problems and create value for enough people that then they were able to, pull a little bit from that, for themselves. So it was always grew up with that mindset of like, how do you create value? And that's really the way to be successful. Instead of saying like, how do I go find a job that pays? It's like, well, how do I create the most value? So um, my interest was in photography way back in the day in high school. And, I thought, wedding photographers, like, they make a lot of money, right? And so, pulled up the yellow pages, flipping up the pages, if you remember those, like, kids, it's these books that they like printed businesses in. And I started calling them one after the other after there. And it's like, hey, can I just like shadow you? Like, I'll just come and carry your bags. And everyone was like, no, you can't. And I was like, come on, I'm a high schooler. I want to, I'll work hard. Like, I've been doing lawn care since I was like old enough to bike to somebody's house. And like, I can do this. And they all said no, except for one lady who picked up the phone and said, sure, yeah, that could work. And I was like, awesome. Well, little did I know at the time that she had like bad arthritis. And so she was like, carrying her bags was actually physically demanding and it was difficult. And she was like retiring. She's like, yeah, if somebody will help carry my stuff, sure. So I started shadowing her and, just showing up. Going to my first wedding in like a 12-inch blizzard, you know, out in Stillwater. And, just like time after time showing up, that she's like, eventually became, hey, can I take some pictures for you? Then eventually it was, hey, can I do this? And she's like, sure. The hesitancy became, know, like, and trust, where she, knew me, she liked what I was doing, and eventually she could trust that I was doing a good job, that if she sent me off to go do something, I would do it well, even though I'm a little high schooler at the time. And eventually got to where she's like, they're asking for your stuff, or like, like people were inquiring. She's like, I'm booked already. Do you want to do this on your own? I'm like, no, I just want to keep shadowing you. I just want to keep working from you. I just want to keep learning from you. And she's like, no, you need to go do these. I'll find somebody else. And so she started pushing business towards me and getting me going. And brought me into like her professional photographers, like a professional association. Every month they would fly in. Back in the day, photographers never wanted to share information. It was always very closed-minded, closed-gated. Like, we're talking 20 years ago, and there wasn't like YouTube and people learning. And that was kind of the continuously showing up and seeing like, how can I do this and learn it from people who've done it really well for years before me, was what kind of got me propelled into thinking like, how can we do this? And what I loved about, how to transition to filmmaking or video was, my dream was always like Steven Spielberg's ability to create a universe where you watch it and you feel like, oh my gosh, these characters are real. Like, if you saw this character walking around the street, you'd be like, oh my gosh, you're, Crocodile Dundee, or like, you're the character from that movie. They're real people and they're real stories. but video was like video quality and photo was photo quality. So like photo paper was really good, video was crap. Until eventually they kind of merged with high definition, and now like this looks like almost like photos, right? Like it's photo quality, you don't notice the difference. And so that desire was like, how do I create that world but have it look good? So photography could look good, but video was crap. And eventually it merged. And so that's where I went to school, I was like a fallback plan for marketing. And I was like, I was going for school for entrepreneurship and realized that entrepreneurs are just marketers. It was like two classes were different. Out of like all the classes, it was like two classes I did change. Like, what? Oh, there's probably a whole lesson there. But that's kind of how I transitioned into marketing, and then all working with businesses because I got out of the wedding space. And suddenly I could do marketing and video and storytelling with businesses. And I realized like this is really powerful for helping businesses create, that universe for customers where they see it and they can envision themselves in it. And it just really helps businesses in terms of like lead generation, lead conversion, saving them time, all of this stuff. And that was ultimately where I realized, like going back to like creating value, is that I could create that value, or my company could create value without me being there, by bringing all the puzzle pieces together and helping businesses solve these problems with video. And that was kind of how that's where it's, grown now to where, I'm doing well, and it's the business, and like I going and clocking in wouldn't be nearly as rewarding as having the business. So yeah, that's
Absolutely.
kind of how I got here.
Yeah. Um, you've kind of given the kind of the pathway. What was the point where you knew, okay, it's ready, it's time for me to start my own business?
It was like I said, I didn't like, well, as a little kid, I would bike to houses and mow lawns and stuff like that. And it was always like, you do your own business. Like that's how the only way you ever made money was like, you're too young to get a job. You just go worked and find places that you can help people. But for me, that was like when that my client was saying like, you need to do this. Like when the market was telling me like, hey, what you have is valuable. Like, like I tell people, like, let the market tell you that you should start a
Mm.
business. Like, let the market grow your business to where he says you need to quit your job. Don't quit your job and go all in. Though that works for 1% of the time. Like, figure out, use that time, like while I was, you know, second shooting or working under somebody else, to really learn with that safety net. And then that side thing eventually was like, hey, you need to do this. Hey, you need to do this. And then, you know, that was kind of how it worked for me.
Yeah. And then the market signal said, time to put full attention here, time to do the focus on
Yep.
that.
Yeah. It's crazy how sometimes you're like, I remember during college, in the winter time. So my lawn care business was dead. Weddings, Minnesota come January, like there's not everyone gets married before January. And that's kind of like the slow season here. I was like, man, this is super slow. What do I do? And a college student was driving school bus, and they're like, oh yeah, I get paid to like just sit while groups go do field trips. And I was like, well, I'll get paid to go do my homework. Sure. So I did that, and eventually I quit that job when I was like, they didn't want to give me a day off, and I was like, they wouldn't like schedule this time off, and I was like, I'm gonna make more in that one day for my own business than it would in like 3+ weeks, almost like a month of pay. And I was like, I'm done. Sorry. Like, this is fun. It's been fun. But like that's like letting the market tell you that like this is really where the value is. And like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned using video to solve problems. Kind of what's one of the most fun or trickiest or rewarding problems that you've used video to solve?
Um a very common problem has been like company trade shows where they want to bring people to their booth, right? And so they want to create some sort of engaging video content that's going to be up on a TV or something like that. And that's going to get people to their trade show booth. So it's like this weird niche of like, what? But like companies spend so much money on trade shows, and having that engaging content just looping there and playing there can bring more people to their booth to engage them, to start conversations. And then we've tied that together. Like, I love working with manufacturing, and like the technology and automations and robotics and all of that stuff there. But yeah, so basically, trade show booths is kind of a unique, weird niche that helps them, create value and solve problems there. Of a weird thing, we did a continuous like fly through drone shot of a building. What was it called? Safety Rail, the railing company in like Mound area, a big employer out there, and we did like a drone shot, came into the factory, drove all went around it, and then like we did like cameras go inside their assembly line, go through like this powder coating machines and getting painted, and then it comes out the other end, and like from start to finish, like raw materials in all the way through the factory to the final thing going out. And they've used that video like a ton. That loops in their trade shows, and they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for different trade shows, millions of dollars really. And like, this is the type of content that people say, whoa, that's really cool. And then they're using it on, advertising, or they're using it on landing pages and sales funnels, or, there's lots of different ways people solving these interesting problems through video in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, with the changes, with the changes in what's available to us, how do you stay kind of innovative and up to date on the things that are most important to your photography and video?
Yeah. I've always been a techie, I don't know if I have it on me here, but I remember like the first time like the 360-degree cameras came out, like the ones we put like your goggles on, you go like that, right? And I picked one of those up right when they very first came out. Quality was crap, but the photos were good. So I started posting some photos. And this way I was like, when you see like something new coming out, oftentimes the ROI comes out sideways. So like getting this 360-degree camera, posting photos of different things, the algorithm says, hey, people engage with this a lot more. And if you're having the right content to the right people, what happened for me was this agency that I'd worked with. I hadn't worked with them for a little while, but they saw these posts and they're like, this is really cool. Hey, we got this project. Do you think you'd be interested in it? Like, I hadn't heard from you in like a year. And now they saw this post because it was interesting. It was unique, because to them, people scrolling, it's valuable because they're scrolling for interesting things. So you're creating value to LinkedIn to show your content. And then once that content's shown to the agency, they say, wow, this is unique. This might be valuable to our client. And then poof, that random new piece of tech that you got landed you multi 5-figure projects. So that's how I do it. Is like, I've done it with a variety of things, like, full on laser cutter machines to print, one-off gifts for clients, or 360 cameras, or drones when they first came out. Like, any time that there's new technology, I just love bringing it in and figuring out like, how can I use it? And then I'll learn, and that creates an ROI. But yeah, like, innovation often can have an ROI in sideways ways, essentially.
Yeah. And kind of one of the key points there is it's not enough to just go and learn it or get it. You have to use it and then create the product. So even if it's just almost experimental, by you posting that out there, it gives people additional ideas to get in touch with you and say, hey, saw what you did. Let's talk about this.
Totally.
Kind of a neat thing there. What are some of the challenges that you've had to overcome in making your business successful over the years?
Oh, challenges. I mean, I feel like, yeah, with business, it's like a never ending a challenge, right? Like, it's a new, I don't know, but that's the fun of it. Like Alex Ramosi talks about, like, you gotta love the process, or like you have to just be in love with the game. Like, you're never gonna become a good basketball player if you hate dribbling the ball. And so it's the same thing with business. Is like, you're never gonna be successful if you don't actually enjoy what you're doing, and if you don't have. I think that's probably the biggest challenges over the years has been like, once I've become complacent to like, hey, I know how to do this. Like, I'm doing this well. It becomes this just repeatable process and thing. You know, being undiagnosed ADHD, I get bored, right? And I'm just like, I know how to do this. This is no fun anymore. And so I start looking for other challenges to solve. And so my challenge is to just stick to the what works, in a slightly tweaking it here and there, um, and then eventually building that team out to hand off the things. Like, that's ultimately like the real business is when you're building that team to do it, um, versus the solopreneur or small team kind of a thing. But yeah, so that would probably be the hardest thing, is being able to just actually hand off things to people and let them run with it and build the team, um, because that is a lot of work. And that's I'm like, well, I want to try something new. I'm like, I've already done that.
Yeah.
Let's go try this other thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I find in working with techies, especially, but sales folks and techies, when they enjoy doing what they're doing. You've got, like, for instance, I got into technology because I like solving problems. I like finding new ways to solve the problems or to use the technologies that's coming out. But then, if I'm in a corporate organization, you tell me I've got to be a manager to move up. I don't know. I don't know if I like doing that. Um, so part of what I end up doing is helping them figure out, do I want to move on that path? And if I do want to be a people leader, or if I'm running my own business and I've got to help the people do what they need to do, how can I manage to be delegating properly and still taking care of folks as well? So that's kind of one of the fun pieces from the leadership side that I get to do. Kind of last question, just to wrap up, so given your journey and your experience, what would be like a top couple of tips or pieces of advice for entrepreneurs or people getting the bug to move into the tech sector in some fashion?
Top piece of advice. Yeah, I would say, like, going back to that question earlier, is like, let the market tell you. So there's the idea that, like, one side is like, oh, I'm just gonna like make this really cool product and I'll find somebody who wants to buy it. And that's a great way if you have a truly innovative thing, but it's also a really good way to go broke. Like, versus if you start with the end need of the client and focus on, like, here's the problem, and it's ideally a perpetual problem. Like right now we're rolling out this thing for business testimonials, where it's for a business can pick based on what they're looking for video testimonials from actual customers, and you'll just be able to go online and place an order, and we'll handle everything. We'll work with your existing clientele to actually get testimonies from your actual client, so nothing's fake. But, like, instead of having to like custom bid everything, we're just gonna focus on that problem, which is they have clients, they just don't know how to get testimonials. And focusing on the problem, which is companies want that's what's helping us develop these products, rather than saying, hey, we want to go do interviews, or we want to go send out a camera crew, and we're saying, well, who wants to hire a camera crew? Well, I don't know. But when we said focus on customers, what's their problem, which is we need testimonials. It's like, okay, well, then why don't we just create a product that is, yes, it's customized service, but it's the same thing every time. They call it productized services. So we're creating a productized service based on the market need. And that's become so much easier to sell now because every company's like, do we want to have good looking testimonials? Yeah. great, here's our credit card. Like,
Yeah.
rather than before. So that's just the biggest tip is like, find the problem that you can solve. That is the problem of the customer, and it's going to scale. Like, yeah, this is like, I'm seeing it already. Like it's scaling, like, because every single customer or every company has this problem. And so, yeah, just figuring out whatever you do, what's the problem that's a perpetual problem that you can solve it, because from there it can scale to other things in the same companies. But like, focus on the problem and everything else gets so much easier.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Especially from the idea of the productized, packaged productized sort of thing for folks. Yeah. So I can go and make it easier for me to get that sort of service right away. I understand it. I'm willing to pay for it, just like you said. Yeah. Cool.
It's like, like the example is like rowing a boat. How, like, if everyone's rowing in the same direction, you go really fast and you go really far. But like, if people get out of sync with like what your actual like goal is, and in what that goal, I think, on a day-to-day basis looks like, is like the mission and that end, like what is it that we do? Because if everyone's like, well, we do this and we do that and we do this and that, versus like, this is what we do, it becomes like, who's your target audience? What's your messaging? What's your communication? What's your automations and lead process from start to finish? What's your sales funnels? All of that stuff, once you realize like, this is the problem we solve, it becomes easier. And then also becomes easier to cross-sell, upsell, downsell. All of this stuff becomes like, in that furthering of that, we're getting to that goal, right? Like, because you're working that way. And that is when it unleashes like so many more ways to not only get more customers, but to get more per customer. And that's like, yeah, that's always my goal, is just like, how can we help clients get more per transaction, as well as more customers? Because then you're quadrupling your results when you can do double both.
Yeah, absolutely. Little small changes, compounding, essentially.
Yep. Great. Totally.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the tips and advice and sharing your story and your journey here. Really appreciate the opportunity to learn more about you, Travis, and Provid, and how you've been able to keep up the innovation, keep doing things and providing value for the customers as well.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
And for folks watching, consider some of Travis's ideas here and things that he said when you're faced with problems and challenges in your own business. Until next time, I'm Steve Semler, FocalPoint Learning Sim. Take care.